Moving into a division that needs to spend billions of dollars on all 5 rosters. We're talking about the AL Central. this this Fangraphs projections is frightening. You have the Twins at 83, the Guardians at 82, the White Sox at 80, the Royals at 73, and the Tigers at 72. And
so that's fascinating because Pacoda has it's not all bunched up like that. It's way more spread out, but it still doesn't have anyone winning 90. Minnesota 88, Cleveland 87, Chicago 80, Detroit 65, Kansas City 64.
So I'll take just this part, and then I'll let you talk about the Tigers. But I will say this so that you don't have to appear as biased as I'm sure you love to be. I do not think the Tigers will be that bad. And the reason I think that is the case is I think Riley Green is a great 20-10. I don't even want to say bounce back candidate because he was hurt last year and with a foot injury. That just takes time to get up to speed. When you're a rookie, it takes time to get up to speed. You could talk about dimensions, helping him a little bit as well. That's also fair. But I just think when you have a lineup that, again, in the non-malicious way, in a empirical scientific way, was as historically bad as it was last year, that can't happen again. You're talking about guys that I think are proven to have a much higher floor than that. The additions that you brought in, that just can't happen again, given the talent that is currently there. So I'm not buying that there's zero improvement when you have, correct me if I'm wrong, a Eduardo Rodriguez around the whole year and Austin Meadows around the whole year. Those guys that you brought in to help raise that floor from that 2021 season, I just don't buy that. I think that the 72 win, I think they can push that a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're hitting the 80 win threshold, but I think fun and respect, a fun, respectable, competitively bad is how I would describe the Tigers in 2023. But
yeah, I mean, it's I think 97 losses is absolutely preposterous. Last year, everything, and I've said this a million times before, but everything that could have possibly have gone wrong last year did. They had almost 20 different pitchers start ball games last year. At one point, we had 1-inning relievers starting and trying to stretch them out to go 3 or 4 innings. The bullpen got hurt a ton. The offense, all of the best players either got hurt or had comfortably the worst years of their career. That wasn't a sustainable, oh yeah, we put the best, 26 out there every day and they all had about what they do on a year-to-year basis out there, and they lost 98 games. That's not at all what happened. And so I think, to your point, a lot of there's just a billion bounce back candidates on the Tigers. Javi putting up the worst offensive numbers of his career, even though he cut his K rate a little bit, actually. You know what I mean? It's just he had no power. The power just vanished for some reason. And so I think that will hopefully, even if it doesn't bounce back to, prime Javi, at least bouncing back to career norms is something that can be somewhat of an expectation. Austin Meadows, obviously, wasn't very good and then got hurt and then took the rest of the season off. And that was a crazy thing that happened. Eduardo Rodriguez just disappearing and then coming back at the very end of the season after we were already well out of it. It's just that there was so many things that went wrong, so many injuries, like I already said. And yeah, I kind of like the rotation. Erod Turnbull's back from Tommy John. I expect huge things out of him. He's a darn good pitcher that not too many people know about. This is a big prove-it year for Matt Manning. We'll kind of see what happens. Michael Lorenzen, I think, is a fine middle of the rotation arm. I think that who am I forgetting? Erod, Turnbull, Manning, Lorenzen.
Skubal when healthy? Question mark.
Skubal, he'll be a second half of the season. Who am I forgetting on opening day? Matt Boyd is back, right? And that so it's just a thing where it's you don't have a true ace on a World Series team or anything, but you have a plethora of like solid middle of the road,
Mm.
like 3 or 4 arms, right? Like you have a lot of those guys. I think that the floor for this rotation is decently high. And yeah, the offense is just going to be a matter of which year was the fluke. 2 years ago when they took a huge step forward and almost went 500, or last year when they were one of the worst teams in baseball and one of the like 5 worst offenses literally in the history of the sport. And I would argue that last year is a lot easier to point to as the fluke. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't expect the Tigers to go like over 500 or anything, but I do expect them to have, yeah, I think my win total is in the mid low 70s as well, somewhere between that like 73 and if everything really clicks, maybe as high as like 77 wins like they did in 2021.
Yeah, I think that you made a really good comment there talking about there's like a million bounce back candidates. I think that the Tigers have really well positioned the roster right now to be obviously like, you know, they're placing $101 bets at the casino basically.
Right.
And like in doing
Which is
that,
what
you're gonna make money back.
right. That's what Scott Harris, that's what the new president of baseball ops wants. He wants
Right.
to just that's why he didn't sign anyone all off season. He wants to come in. This is his first year. He needs to come to his own conclusion on all of these players. So no free agent signings, a couple of trades for sure, trades that I really liked as well. And he's going to go out there with a clean slate. We're going to see he's going to base his opinion based on the performance of all these players this year. And then like there's already been a ton of turnover, right? Like I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure last year's opening day roster, only like 10 or 11 dudes are on this year's opening day roster. Like the turnover is already starting for the bottom part of the roster and it'll continue just throughout the season and the next season. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's what he's doing. I think that's what he wants because he needs to know who's going to be part of the long-term plan and who's not.
I think as well when you talk about there's two, I think, factors that you can't look at on Fangraphs or can't look at on Pacoda that I think will also help the Tigers this year. And that what you talked about is figuring out who those guys are. That creates an environment where it does not matter what the record is. You guys are going to have everyone's going to be, at least the hope is from a mentality standpoint, competing for 162 games, which I think is super important. Like this is, I think that your organization and leadership has done a really good job of framing this season as like this is not like the throes of a very intense grinding long-term rebuild, which kind of basically tells players you're not going to be here by the time we're good again. I liked telling guys, hey, you know, the wins and losses column right now, by the time we're in August, September, it might not look great, and that might be hard on you, but know that the confidence that we have in you, if you're producing and you're doing what is expected of you, like you're not leaving.
Right. Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, like you can go down the list. Nick Maton and Matt Vierling, who were like just acquired from the Phillies. They were bench players on a World Series roster, never got playing time. Now they have for the first time in their careers have opportunities to be everyday starters.
Exactly.
Austin Meadows, as you said last year, like wasn't good and barely played when barely played, and when he did, he wasn't that good.
Right.
Jonathan Scope was awful last season. We'll see what happens with him. Ryan Kreidler's a guy, like a super utility guy that was a really good prospect 2 years ago and hasn't really been the same, and now is getting a look at the majors. Jake Rogers, catcher, had Tommy John, hasn't played in a year and a half. Like he was a former top prospect. Like the entire roster is literally dudes that at one point or currently were believed to be really good ball players and are finally getting opportunities, whether they're 22 or 28, to be everyday players for a club. And the Tigers are just spinning the wheel and seeing who's going to stick and who's not. And not all of them will, but none of them won't either. Some of them will as well. So like it's going to be from like, and we've probably spent way too much time just talking about a team that's probably going to finish fourth, but like it's just going to be one of those years where they're going to see what they have, and it's going to be a really interesting watch just be from like a roster building perspective, no matter what the win-loss record is. And I do expect them to at points, maybe go on a couple of heaters and surprise some people for a little bit. Like
I
this
was
is
gonna
really
say
not a bad. This is not a bad ball club. Like people just look at last year's record and last year's offense and go, oh, well, they didn't sign anyone, so that's going to be the same again. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
So the other thing I was gonna say is you said go on some runs and stuff. Factor number 2, Miguel Cabrera retirement tour means when you get near milestones, the team will heat up because if
he's
it's
not near any more milestones.
no more, there's no more
He's
milestones.
literally reached all of them. Like his hit total,
any
like
Tigers
he's already passed
milestones.
3K, he's already passed 500, he already passed 600 doubles. He's nowhere near any big RBI things anymore. Like he's literally like there are no milestones. Like
I was thinking,
got all of them. It's just gonna be. I don't even think Miggy's gonna play that much. I guess that's something worth noting, because that's probably one of the biggest storylines for the Tigers this year as well. Is just like his farewell tour. Yeah, I honestly, if he ends the season with more than like 81 games played, I'll be shocked. I think he's gonna play like once a series and like Sundays. For like home Sundays, and that's like kind of it. I because again, there are no milestones to chase. I don't really think he's gonna get we're gonna play him 140 games for his last season. Like I actually don't think he's gonna play.
He only needs 153 RBIs for 2K. That's all I gotta say.
Okay, yeah.
Listen, man, career highs 139. Not saying it's out of the question.
Dang right.
Yeah, so I mean the rest of the AL Central, I mean the Royals, like the only thing I'd say about them is they did the right thing. I mean, I say this as a Cardinals fan who, when they hired Mike Matheny, I went, that's really meh, and I think that's gonna not go well for us. And he sure botched 3 really good chances to win a World Series for us. Really 4 if you want to include 2015, and then obviously got hired by the Royals, proceeded to suck eggs for every year he was the manager, and got shown the door. I still don't think that's the best firing they did. The best firing they did was firing Cal Eldred, their pitching coach. I love Brady Singer. Cardinals fans get on Twitter very often and are like, we are going to trade for him. That's the guy that we think. And I'm like, I would like it, but how dumb is Kansas City? So I really like Brady Singer. Like Vinny Pasquantino had a great, 100 game. I don't know. I don't remember how many games it was, but had a good handful of games. I think that team's future really rests on the fact that Bobby Witt had a 99 WRC plus last year. And the defense was there were definitely plays on Twitter that I saw of him where I was like, that isn't
errors and had a significantly negative OAA. There was not a single defensive metric that was good. Outside of maybe his range or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You'd see the odd clip of him on Twitter making a great play, but as someone who was excited to see him come up and who would watch the odd Royals game, which I'm sure you did as well, with being a divisional opponent, there were games where you watched him, you're just like, what are you doing? Like it's like, dude, it's like not good. It's Pujols running to first. You have 4 years to make the throw.
Yeah, and it's incredible athlete, and just was brutal defensively, like all around.
So I don't know if it's a patience thing with him. I don't know if it's just like he's so he knows what his capabilities are, and I don't know if it's an overreaching thing, but I think that's the next step for him. I also think it just they need to figure out if he's playing third base or shortstop, because I feel like that also can't help a really young player who is already not a question mark on defense. It was always told, like, at least in the minors, I'm pretty sure the reputation was the glove is fine. Like it will play at shortstop, but for me, it's just, if he's that bad of a defender, like we're talking about somebody that needs to have a 130 WRC plus to sustain that. And I think he's more than capable, but he's definitely someone I have my eye on this year of entire new staff, year 2, take a breath. Let me see what you have. But
yeah, I mean, the Royals are going to be the worst team in this division. And like, I understand that I root for the only other team that is in like consideration for that crown. So like, I understand that there might be bias there, but like in like truly trying to be objective about it, I think this is like comfortably the worst team in the division. I think they're going to push 100 losses, if not hit 100 losses again. And yeah, I think a lot of their future is just obviously built around how good is Bobby Witt Jr. going to be, and he needs to hit a lot better. He needs to play a lot better defense. Last year was just a rookie year, and he's a former whatever. He peaked at the number 2 prospect in all of baseball.
I
Like
believe so. Yeah.
the ceiling is and the raw ability we see and is obviously there, but dude, yeah, like big time needs to take a big step offensively and needs to really either A, to your point, play a lot better defensively at short, or B, get moved and get moved permanently. So there's really nothing else on that offense like at this point. That's pretty much it. Like there's I don't know, like what are we expecting from Salvador Perez in 2023? Like I don't think a whole terrible amount. The biggest thing with them outside of Bobby Witt Jr. is their pitching. We've been hearing, if you're a fan of a AL Central team, you've been hearing for the last like 5 years how the Royals have like this great young pitching core that's like coming up, and you're starting to see the fruits of the labor a little bit. Brady Singer's obviously a darn good pitcher and whatnot, but I think that for me to take the Royals seriously, like going forward, I'm never going to take them seriously this year. It's not happening. But like going forward, like 2024 through I don't know, the next 2 years, I guess, sure. Like they need to take that big step forward in their rotation and pitching wise for me to be like, okay, they're going to hang their hat on that. This was real. It wasn't just nonsensical hype for the last 5 years. We're finally starting to see that. And if they can even have a competent offense, they're going to steal some games from some people. That's like the biggest thing I'm looking to see from them this year is just how good is their rotation going to be. And nothing can save them from being awful this year. But if their rotation isn't bad, then I'll start kind of re-believing the hype that I heard in like 2017 about the future of this ball club.
There's a few caveats that I have with that even though. So any team that you want to try to build great pitching around, their prospects in terms of who's going to be behind them on defense are, I think, at best serviceable, in actuality presently liabilities, and have the potential to be nightmares. Like MJ Melendez is a very good hitter, especially for the catcher position. He was the only, based on Savant data, the only catcher worse than Salvador Perez last year. It's gotten worse. Like when first base defense metrics like are not super important. Even if Vinny Pasquantino was Paul Goldschmidt caliber, or even like he could become Albert Pujols, who, if you go on Fangraphs and look, was like a 30 DRS first baseman, which sounds insane to say out loud. Even if all that comes, that's at first base. For me, like all the guys they're bringing up, like Michael Massey at second base, if you have all this good pitching, you need to have a good defense. And I don't see where that's coming up in their farm system presently. And paying for defense in free agency, like very rarely is there someone that you would give like the big money that indicates, we're ready to spend. Like it would be like a Dansby Swanson. Mm-hmm. That's maybe the example for that. But obviously that's at a position that they're not going to do that at. So
Michael A. Taylor, but they already did that.
Right. Like for me, what I want to see from that is I need where for you talked about, needing to see that. My proof in the pudding for that is I need to see that lineup can prove that they can play defense for those pitchers. And with those pitchers, like, did Asa Lacy just like fool everyone because of COVID? Like I root for the guy. Obviously, I'm not here
he was
like
such a dog at A&M.
Yeah, but
he was such a dog in college.
Like, did he just trick everyone?
Because I know.
He can't throw strikes. And it is a prolonged issue. Like when you first show up to the minor leagues and if you have a 5 walk per 9, but you have a 16 K9 at high A ball, you're like, okay, like maybe just don't try to exclusively throw punch outs and that walk rate will come down. Like clearly you're, showing that you have strikeout stuff. Great. We're prioritizing outs, it just hasn't gotten better. And I think that vaunted pitching dragon that we heard so much about, like Daniel Lynch is a 5
Yeah, that's my
in a
point.
rotation. Like
Take a big step forward with the pitching, or I think you're going to be in a rebuild continuously for the next like 5 years again.
Yeah, and part of me says,
or Bobby Witt Jr. has a 130 WRC plus and is even like a league average defender.
well, and that's where part of me says like they don't have the number 1 pick, but like that's where part of me almost wants to say just go draft the Dylan Cruz types then. Go draft like the college hitter that is just going to rake, and then just if you want to do that, like if you want to just fill your rotation with pretty good starting pitching and have your entire hitting lineup be just dogs, you can do that. That there's a blueprint where that's plausible and that works. And that to me is, I think, that what you're saying, if the pitching doesn't work out, but they need to get on that much sooner rather than later. I don't think they can afford to go the entire season and just be like, we're going to post some Zach Greinke throwing an eephus on Twitter. Like, your fan base is like, that plays now. That'll play until like Memorial Day. And then when you're 25 games under and Greinke's like Greinke and Singer, the only pitchers you have that have their heads above water, I just have concerns about their future. I think much more than like the Tigers have this plan of we're going to see what happens. That at least it feels a lot better than.
Well, like there's a guarantee that some will stick. The Royals have like one or two. They have 2 players on both sides of the ball that you look at and you're like, okay, like the Royals are good in 5 years. These 2 dudes will probably be on the team.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that
the rest of the division is actually fun to talk about, though.
I was gonna I was about to transition to the White Sox, so sure, I'm sure that clip that'll sit on you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We can go Chicago. I really do think that the White Sox still, in my opinion, have the highest ceiling in this division. And last year was a train wreck. Like if you were,
it was very bad.
If you were to rank last season, if you were to rank the teams in order of most disappointing season, 1 and 2 is either the San Francisco Giants or the Chicago White Sox. And I don't think anyone else is particularly close in that discussion on given like what expectations were going into 2022 than those 2 ball clubs. And I think there's a legitimate argument the White Sox were at the very top.
I would say they're number 1.
Yeah. And last year was awful. And now they got like La Russa's gone and like new vibes and everything. They didn't really do anything in the offseason except get new vibes and then bring in Andrew Benintendi, which like very depressingly is their biggest free agent signing ever, I'm pretty sure. And so like it's I don't know, man. Like they're a huge question mark to me. They could legitimately, the White Sox could be 3rd or they could win 95, and neither would shock me whatsoever. They have the ability to have a really, really good offense, like a really good one. And they also have the ability to have a really bad offense with 6 dudes with 30% K rates. They have a pitching rotation that has the ability to be really, really solid with 2 legitimate aces on it. They also have the ability to have a rotation with like 3 to 4 dudes with a 5 ERA. Like it's mind-boggling to me. The bullpen is really shaky. Just kind of all of it right now is kind of shaky. Obviously, the Hendricks thing is out of like bigger than baseball, and that's much different. And it's actually, there was a thing that he's not even going to be on the 60-day IL, so that's awesome.
Yeah,
but like even when Hendricks comes back, I still think that the rest of that bullpen is still like really shaky at the moment. So that's kind of a question mark. But this is just such a volatile team. Like I could see them going under 500, and I could see them winning 95 games.
So I you talk about the bullpen. Like, it's crazy that like Ronaldo Lopez was just awful, like
Yeah.
just legitimately terrible, like 3-4 years ago, and then last season churned out in the bullpen like sub one whip, like not a crazy K guy, obviously, but like he had a 2.76 ERA and a 1.93 FIP. Like clearly has unlocked something. It almost gives me like obviously different because Carlos Martinez was at one point a good starting pitcher, but when the Cardinals just like had to move him to the bullpen and he randomly was like an all-star closer, like Ronaldo Lopez could be that guy. He's also the same guy that had like a 6.5 ERA, like you mentioned, over a 30 start sample size like 3 years ago. So I don't know. And all of my friends from back home in the Chicago suburbs will never let me rest with this, but I will stand by it. I don't believe in Andrew Vaughn. I just don't. I understand that they put him in positions where he just straight up could not play in the outfield, and that was painfully obvious. But I mean, like we're talking about a guy that I think, in order to be viable as a player, has to OPS 850, and I don't know if he's capable of doing that. I mean, I know last year there were some good stretches he can hit for average and had like he has 750 OPS last year. And this was like the supposed big breakout of like, oh, we're not going to mess him around on playing time. Like he's going to play every day. The OBP is not great. I get you don't want to pay Jose Abreu at that age, but I don't know. I feel like they're really hinging on him breaking out, and then like Luis Robert, is he going to be 2028 win,
Right.
or is he going to be just like a borderline all-star? Which is crazy to say that like a borderline all-star would be a disappointment, but if I don't think you can, count on, a couple tenths under 800 OPS Luis Robert and be like, that's what we're expecting from you. Eloy, can he play 100 games even? Like if he played 100 games, I think I'd call that a success for the White Sox this year. There's just so many in comparison to my ideal, not I shouldn't say ideal, my division pick in Cleveland. Cleveland to me has so many just safeguards where I agree with you that
That's
they
how
don't
I
have
word it too. Cleveland comfortably has the highest floor in the division, while Chicago is very versatile. They have a super low floor, but if everything magically worked out and you could guarantee everyone was going to be healthy and play at their best, you'd probably take Chicago. At least for
yes.
me.
But but when I look at Cleveland though, like a great example, Tristan McKenzie, get well soon, King. Love watching him play. Great person. Um, he went down for what could be up to 8 weeks. They have 4 top 100 prospect starting pitchers that are all either insanely like have insane pedigree and have ace potential, and the other 3 are college starting pitchers that are all about in the 50 to 60 prospect range that comfortably could have made the opening day roster and were probably throwing 160 innings of 3.8 ERA. Like we're talking about a team that could lose arguably its entire starting rotation, and the replacements I'd be like would still probably be at least league average.
That's been their thing for the last decade. It's mind-boggling to be
It's
like
unbelievable.
follow a division rival of Cleveland. Like they've whooped our ass for the last decade. So like we'll get that out of the way. They have sunned us for the better part of the last 10 years. But it's miraculous how they continue. They just have a pitching factory over there. Like they
It's
really do.
unbelievable.
And yes, they have a lot of top prospects and stuff because their pitching development is unreal, but they'll throw out a dude you've never heard of that was like a night watch janitor 3 weeks ago, and he'll go out and give you 6 innings of 3 earned run ball and give you a quality start. And you're like, okay, for sure. Like this dude didn't know what a baseball was 6 weeks ago. And like, yeah, now he's, topping out at 96 and has a nice curveball. And like, it's they have an insane pitching factory over there. I mean, we can just naturally transition into Cleveland if you want, unless you have more to say about Chicago.
No,
But like,
that was what I was saying. This is my
yeah,
transition. It
like
is they're
Cleveland's
the
my division
antithesis.
winner as well, and it's because they have comfortably the highest floor in this division. And like even last year when people were like, "Oh, Cleveland like sucks," and they're whatever. Like I was against the grain in that one. I didn't have them winning the division. I think everybody had the White Sox after what happened in 2021. But I was like, Cleveland's a darn good ball club, man. Like they just they have J Ram now locked up for a while. Like
Yeah,
they
that
have their offense is J Ram and a bunch of 2.5 to 3.5 win players. Well, Jimenez has 6 win potential apparently, but but you know what I mean? Like it's literally just it's one of the best hitters on the planet, and then a bunch of dudes that are going to win somewhere between 2.5 and 4 wins, and that's a good lineup. Like that's all. That's kind of what I was saying about the Red Sox. Like that's a good regular season lineup. Yes, they don't have the star power of like last year's Dodgers team or whatever that
mhm.
has whatever like half their lineup could win have 6 WAR, but like
Yeah, I got you.
it's one of those things where like as a tie, like I'm begging for a 2 win player. Like you know what I mean? Like it's there if you can just be that solid everyday ball player that goes out there and is an above league average hitter and doesn't strike out a boatload and plays sound defense, you can hit eighth in that Cleveland lineup, and they're going to go out and win 88 plus games every single year. And their pitching factory is part of that. They have one of the best closers, if not the best closer, especially healthy closers in the game of baseball right now. Um, yeah, they are like guaranteed to win like 87, and then it's just a matter of how high their ceiling is every year.
So I when you were saying how they're just discovering players, I was just like, I think a good analogy is it feels like the Guardians live out the plot uh of the movie The Rookie every single year.
Yeah, literally.
Of that I think that's a very good film analogy to describe what Cleveland's able to do. And yeah, I think that the JRAM extension serves to show what sound organizational uh, leadership does when wanting to retain players. Um, again, like we'll get to my club later, but like I think it shows to like JRAM for sure like left money on the table
Yeah.
with that extension, and that's done with the intention of the fact and the understanding that he knows that the team is going to surround him with players that are capable of not excellence, but like near I mean, and Jimenez is a great example. That was excellence last year.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
near
100%.
like Ahmed Rosario being like a 3 WAR player like that. I mean, like Stephen Kwan, you're talking about a guy that doesn't strike out.
Yeah.
Goodness. Um,
Do you have like a 5 win season or something? Like,
I think that Kwan had. I mean, I'm. What do you think was higher, his K rate or his WAR?
golly.
That's actually a great.
I think his K rate probably still. That's
Probably it was actually 9%, which is honestly a little higher than I thought it was going to be. But he
yeah,
was
but
a
that's
four
still
and a half win
insanely
player
low.
last year. Yeah, he had a 124 WRC plus,
Yeah.
9.7%.
Not
Dude,
bad.
if he had a 15% walk rate with that, can you imagine? Give him like Brendan Donovan walk rate and
Okay,
that K
well,
rate.
yeah.
That's nuts.
Let's just make the best hand-eye coordinated hitter of all time. Yeah.
I sure would like it on my team. I like Oscar Gonzalez. I thought the Josh Bell signing
Loved
was
it.
so smart.
Loved it.
It felt it feels like Josh Bell now has been. It feels like the Pirates traded him to Cleveland and he's been there ever since. Like it feels so natural. Like maybe
Yeah.
Josh Bell just gives off Midwest ball club vibes, but like it just feels so natural that like he's a 2.4 win first baseman and he's going to OPS like 806.
Gonna hit you 25 bombs.
Yep, not going to be an all-star, but a guy that you like hard to replace. Like that I don't know, just the Guardians just are in such a good spot, I think. And I think that they're content to watch nearly every other team in the AL Central set themselves on fire and just be the only team with the fire extinguisher. The Twins,
Yeah, let's talk Twins, man.
speaking of car tire fire.
This is easily the most like interesting conversation in this division.
They're playing MLB The Show. They're playing MLB The Show. And that's really the only way. It's a 12-year-old playing MLB The Show that has no concept of pitching. That is what I think the Twins. It's what like Joey Gallo. I saw there's an article on MLB.com talking about projecting opening day lineups. He's their first baseman. And that might not be true. We can't, I'm not in the mind of the Twin Cities front office, but they're sticking him at first base. Like that's a move I think OOTP would yell at you at, and usually that's a good barometer of if that makes sense in real life or not. But I think retaining Correa was was priority 1 and end of list for them, and I think that they got lucky with that. I do think he's going to be fine.
Same.
It was really weird when all that came out. A part of me was like, is that ownership just trying to tank contract value? And then Steve Cohen publicly tweeting Steve Cohen pulled the George W. Bush mission accomplished banner speech, which was awesome as someone that roots for the Mets downfall. But there's just the Twins feel like this enormous stew, and there's so many ingredients and there's so many different components in this, and we're not going to know what it tastes like until June.
Yeah. It's a really weird conversation because the Twins are another team that I could see them winning 78 games, or I could see them pushing 90 if everything works. Their rotation, you want to talk about a rotation with no ace but a ton of 2s and 3s. That's exactly what the Minnesota Twins rotation is. I don't hate it at all, but you definitely need to have good offensive numbers if you're going to roll out with that. The big question mark every year is how many games is Byron Buxton going to play? I think the Michael A. Taylor signing means that he's going to play a little bit more DH this year to try to save that a little bit. But, that's always that's one of the best hitters and most valuable players in the league when he's healthy. Just never seems to be. He's played 100 games once in his career, I believe. And then Correa is fine. And I understand why that's a big deal. I totally understand. That's one of the best players in baseball, one of the best players in a premier position in baseball. But okay, you brought back someone that was on the team last year when you didn't go 500, and I'm supposed to raise your win total by 10. I know that they addressed the pitching a lot more. I know that wasn't their only move, but that is not going to single-handedly make me want to say that the Twins are going to win the AL Central or anything. And so there's still a lot of question marks on that team. I still have a lot of questions about a lot of the players offensively, a lot, nearly all of them actually, outside of Correa and Buxton. There's a ton of volatility in that offense still, and the rotation. I mean, we're gonna see what a rotation of a bunch of number 2s and 3s looks like. To your point, they have an incredible closer as well, so that obviously helps. But I mean, you got a little bit of questions, I think, surrounding that bullpen besides Duran. So yeah, man, it's a lot could happen with that team as well. And I think that really, for me, the only debate is who's finishing second. I think the Tigers are comfortably 4. I think the Royals are comfortably 5. And I'm very confident in Cleveland winning the division. It's really just a matter of who's second, and is second going to be good enough for an AL wildcard? I don't think second will be good enough for an AL wildcard in this division. And I think I would probably go Minnesota than Chicago, but honestly that might be depending on what time of day you ask me and who the Tigers are playing. Maybe
Scott's more of a morning White Sox and more of an afternoon Twins.
Yeah. Around lunchtime I switch over to the Twins a little bit, and then by dinner
once he has lunch he's a little less cranky on the Twinsies,
right know?
The memories of Joe Mauer and Justin Morneau subside, and you're like, they're gone. Nightmare.
Still haunts me.
For me, it's Sonny Gray. you talk about like, oh, twos and threes. Like he's made 30 starts 3 times in his career. Like when he was coming out of college, there were like injury questions, or when he was coming out of the draft, excuse me, there was injury questions with him, like as a prospect. And then he came up, and then his first, like, he had his call up year in Oakland, and then he had 2 years where he made back to back, like fully healthy years. Everyone was like, oh, okay, so we're good. And he didn't do it again until 2019. And when we're talking about, can this Twins team make a wild card run or make a push for a playoff position, exactly what we're talking about. When you have a rotation that doesn't have an ace that could carry you through leaner weeks, when maybe you have your 4 guy go down for a little bit, or you have your 3 starter has, a couple week stretch where mechanically something's off and they get, maybe shelled a little bit. When you have a rotation that doesn't have a guy that can carry that every 5 days and carry that luggage, I think your team is overall over that 162, it's going to suffer. And I think hinging your bet on opening Sonny Gray throwing 175 innings. I like Joe Ryan a lot. Tyler Mahle was a great acquisition.
I love Joe Ryan.
Cincinnati's ballpark, aka Coors Light, just absolutely drained his potential. I think you look at his numbers last year. I think he had a 4.4 ERA, and his xERA was like 3.5. And obviously, you said that's not ace, but you give me a fully healthy 3.5 ERA guy, 100%. And he makes 32 starts, I will pay him to be on my team for 15 seasons.
For sure.
So I don't know. And also, I'll say it, the uniforms rebrand, it just feels like they went to like a really nice, if you go to like a really nice car wash where they do detailing and the seats are a lot cleaner, they clean underneath, but it's still the same car. That's what the Twins uniforms feel like.
Sure.
They're not bad. They're not bad, but in they're just, I don't know. I yearn for the, this just ages us and shows how old we are, but I yearn for that early mid 2000s. I like the bigger, bolder logos, and I'm anti-minimalist, especially on a baseball uniform. I have 2 Slugbird hats in different colors for a reason. Like, this is my favorite Cardinals logo. So, I'm a fan of that kind of that kind of wackiness.
100%. Yeah,